gosh.
So this is our family now.
Yes, yes, yes.
What about Archibald? Is he your family as well?
Yes, he's our cousin.
Oh wow, beautiful.
So, have you seen the book, Captains
not.
Courageous? I've got it in the car. So Archie, they were both of the same name. Archie was killed 2 weeks before Donny was born. Capitano Mac was born, and up at St Cyrus, which is north of Montrose, there's another. They're both on the war memorial there. We had these stones. They were lying.
Yeah.
Like that, and about 15 years ago, my father decided to put them up again.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah.
So, this is very nice that you've come. We just got back from Italy on Sunday, so where we presented Donny's sword to the Museum of the Partisans in Morfasso. We were out there in 2019 on the 75th anniversary of Donny's death, and were hosted beautifully by the Comuni di Bettola, Ponte dell'Olio, Canzano, and we stayed in the prisoner of war camp where Donny was captured and became a POW, and then we walked all around where he was shot.
Is he still there?
Yes, it's a sort of monastery now. But we stayed in it, and then where they found the tunnel where Donny and Gunnar escaped, and they'd mapped that, and so we walked all the way round there, and then in the book. At the cemetery in Bettola, where Donny was first laid to rest, there was a lady there that we met in 2019 who was just old enough to get up to the windowsill to see Donny's funeral procession.
Wow.
So that was extraordinary. And then another lady, Laura Obertelli, her grandmother knew, and they had actually taken partisans in to feed them and everything. So it was quite a. So do you live up in Edinburgh?
Yes, yeah, I've been here. I was just explaining 40 years now.
All right.
Seriously, I've never been here.
It's a beautiful
before.
cemetery.
It's lovely, isn't it? Yeah, fantastic.
We've got sort of loads more space down below for ashes and the rest of us. And then this trip, where we presented, Donny was a Queen's Own Cameron Highlander, and we presented his sword at a ceremony to this museum of the parties. Have you been there, Morfasso?
No.
Just outside, Ponte dell'Olio. So that was. I'll just show you the. Claudio Clementi, and here's the sword. And then Carol arrived in the Jeep to present I gave the speech about Donny, and Carol gave the speech about so this is Morfasso where it was. And then she presented the sword. Donny left his family home to my father, so we grew up, and we had holidays. We were up at St Cyrus, which is north of Montrose, and so we grew up with Donny's bedroom, Donny's toy soldiers, his collection of butterflies. So we felt as though we knew him very well, and my father always wanted to keep the story alive. So we were taken as children to Piacenza and to Bettola and Genoa.
So you've made a pilgrimage almost, family pilgrimage.
Well, yes, and in 2019 we were invited by Sean Hullis, well, by the Italians, because it was the 75th anniversary of Capitano Mac, Donny to us, of his death.
Yeah.
And then we went out this time to present Donny's sword, his ceremonial sword for the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders. And I have Archie, his father's sword, and I have Donny and Archie's medals. But Archie never met his son. Archie was killed at the Dardanelles 2 weeks before Donny was born.
Yeah.
So
I think, was that during the Gallipoli campaign?
yes, yeah.
So amazing, so much history just in.
Yes. So my father followed Donny to Winchester College and then into the military, but my father was Royal Engineers, as was Donny's father, Archie. So,
and I think Donny saw service in North Africa.
he did.
That's
Yes.
That's what I was reading.
Aha. Right.
Yeah, and he escaped from a POW camp.
So he was captured, became POW, and in 2019 we stayed in the POW camp. It's now a sort of seminary, and then we the tunnel had they photographed it by doing geomorphic sort of structures of how they'd got out, and then he joined the partisans, and he also helped a downed American pilot get back to Allied lines, and the American family came out in 2019 to join us for the celebrations.
That's okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Just a few words to introduce you the other speakers. And thank you to Simone for helping me to organize this day. And thank you for the friends to the stand up to us in Edinburgh to came. Thank you to everybody. And just to leave you with a sentence from Capitano Mac. When the other partisan asked to him why he didn't return to England, he have the chance to do. He replied easy, because every place is good to fight for freedom. And that's all. If you want to speak, Sam, you're welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Hello, my name's Hilary Mackenzie, and Donny was my father's cousin, so our cousin once removed. And we felt as a family that we grew up with Donny, because we were in his house, and we had Donny's bedroom, Donny's collection of toy soldiers, Donny's collection of butterflies, and my father was very keen that we keep the story of Donny alive. My grandfather was like the father that Donny never had, because his own father died a matter of weeks before he was born. And there are monuments to him at Winchester College, Trinity College, Oxford, here in Edinburgh, and in Italy, where he's lionised with the Italian partisans for the liberation of the Nure Valley. So we've just come back from Italy, where we presented Donny's sword with the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders sword to the Museum of the Resistance in Morfaso. It's a small museum, but it's absolutely terrific, and it's got the picture on the front of the book and the one that you've got there on the poster. So it's a privilege to meet you all, and thank you for coming to pay your respects to Donny.
Cheers. We did this for a while. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all. I'm not a very good orator, so I put a few words in writing, but I try to be as quick as possible. So first of all, happy Festa Liberazione or Liberation of Italy Day, as you prefer to say. I would like to introduce myself, first of all. My name is Simone Rossi, and I'm the chair of the branch, the London and UK branch of AMPI, which is the Associazione Nazionale Partigiani d'Italia, translated to National Association of the Partisans of Italy. I would like, this is my first time in this kind of tenure here in Edinburgh, and I would like to thank Raffaele for inviting me and the organization I represent, and for bringing to my attention the life and the story of Capitano Mac or Donald Mackenzie. Maybe all of you know what AMPI is, but I would like just to explain to you. So this is, as I said, is the Association of Partisans of Italy, and it says Partisan of Italy, not Italian partisan, because the resistance in Italy wasn't just a matter of Italian fighting against fascism, but there were a lot of foreigners who, for whatever reason, they found themselves in Italy, or they decided to go to Italy from where they were before, and they wanted to contribute to the fight against Mussolini's and Hitler's regimes with the partisans instead of being with formal armies. And the association was established in 1944, June 1944 in Rome, by the committee which was leading the partisan warfare. So it was called National Committee of Liberation, or Comitato Nazionale di Liberazione. And they decided that it would, once Italy would come back to democracy, this organization would keep the memory alive and protect the memory and the story of the resistance for the generation to come. And as you know, as every generation, as everyone, we start dying out, and those remarkable people, partisans and non-partisans, those who were fighting with the Anglo-American forces as well, they start dying out. So 17 years ago, AMPI decided that they would like to open membership to anyone who would share the same values and principles of the partisans. Basically, anti-fascism, love for democracy and for freedom. And it doesn't matter, if they are not from their generation. As you see, you can clearly understand, I'm not any close to their generation. I was born in 1977. So anyone, regardless of age, gender, religion, political belief, they can join us. So you're more welcome to apply if you want. And of course, there's only one request, that you share the anti-fascism values that our forefathers were believing in. So for the last 79 years, AMPI mission has been ensuring that the values and aspirations for truly democratic Italy and Europe will be kept alive and implemented in our society by our institution. So for those who still are in Italy, this means advocating painstakingly for the full application of the Constitution of the Italian Republic, which core principles reflect the values and aspirations of the people who were in the resistance, but also the people who were fighting with the Allies. As to those who are outside Italy, whether Italian citizens or not, it entails ensuring that the memory of the fight against fascism and Nazism is kept alive, and is used to draw lessons on how democracy, freedom of speech, social justice, harmony among communities and among people from different backgrounds should be not taken for granted. The seed of hate, of intolerance, of authoritarianism, sorry, it's a long word, I'm not good at pronouncing it, and all the evils we saw back at the time in 1930s and 40s are still planted in corners of our society, and they just look for, fertile ground to emerge again. So what we do as members of AMPI, and we invite all people who are our friends and supporters, is to keep this lesson from history in mind, and just denounce any form of fascism, hatred, xenophobia, face it whenever confronted whenever it appears. So as I mentioned before, the victory over the fascist Nazi regimes is an important milestone in the history of Italy and Europe and the world in general, also because it was the end of long decades of suffering for millions of people. So the liberation of Italy and then of Germany was the end of a nightmare for Jews, Roma, homosexual, transsexual people, people with disability, and anyone who was deemed as unwanted in the fascist and Nazi societies. And it was a victory which was achieved as a joint effort from people from all over the world. So not just partisans from Italy, not partisans who went to Italy, but, members of the armed forces from the USA, Soviet Union, France, Poland, the UK, of course. And I personally really like, and I think as an organization, we really like to remember this kind of broad church, this transnational aspect of the fight against fascism and against Nazism. And that's why it's important for us to be here today, because we're remembering someone who represents this kind of internationalism of the fight against Mussolini and Hitler's regimes at the times. So it's a bit difficult to get figures, but what I can tell is that out of the 240,000 men and women who were in the resistance as partisans, around 10% they were from other countries. So there were really people from all places in Europe, from the Americas, but also from Africa, because those who were living in the colonies of Italy, like Ethiopia or Eritrea or Libya, they just, maybe as prisoner of war, they find themselves in the country and they contributed to it. So this kind of kaleidoscope of people is what we would like to remember today, and we would like to do it through the memory of Archibald Donald Mackenzie, or Capitano Mac as he was called down in Italy when he was in the resistance. So he distinguished himself for his bravery, and I'm aware that he still cherished, his memory is still cherished now near Piacenza, where he was fighting. He was born in Cheshire in 1914, and it was just a few weeks after his dad, Lyndoch, is it right? Lyndoch. Archibald Mackenzie had died in the First World War. And the family, I understand they came from the silk industry, and his father, Lyndoch, was a very brave and celebrated captain in the British Armed Forces. Archibald, or Captain Mac, graduated in 1936, and then he joined the 2nd Battalion of the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders in India, and then he moved to Egypt with the 11th Indian Infantry Brigade and the 4th Indian Division, where he trained for the desert warfare. And as soon as Italy entered the war on the side of Germany on the 10th of June 1940, his brigade joined the Western Desert Forces, and they were engaged in many of the battles against Italian and German forces in that part of Africa, the northeast part of Africa where Libya and Egypt are. And he became a prisoner of war with his battalion after the Battle of Tobruk at the beginning of 1942, and they were deported as prisoner of war in a camp near in a town called Veano, which is near Piacenza. It's a town just like 50 miles south of Milan in northern Italy. And while he was there as a prisoner, things developed in the country. So in spring 1943, there were several strikes against Mussolini's regime. So it was the first time in 2 decades almost when people rebelled against the regime. And actually there was workers from factories who did it. So And this somehow was leading to the position of Mussolini as the head of the regime on the 25th of July 1943. A new government was appointed, and they started negotiating secretly with the Anglo-American government to switch side and to become allies too. In the meanwhile, the allies were marching north from Sicily, and when the armistice was formally denounced on the 8th of September that year, 1943, it was chaos in Italy because no one knew what to do, and a lot of people decided it was time to start organizing warfare, a guerrilla against Mussolini's fascists and Nazi, who in the meanwhile they started to occupy the country. So they figured that's what was happening, and they occupied with the troops most of Italy. So they went quite close to Naples, between Naples and Rome. And at the time, Capitano Mac, on the 8th of September itself, he managed to escape from Viano, and he decided to stay in the country. So he helped some of his fellow escapees to go to Switzerland. He could have done the same, but he decided to stay there and to contribute to the fights against Nazism and fascism from within the front line. And actually, as I mentioned, apparently maybe ran in the family, was a good soldier. He was very well appreciated for his skills. So he managed to become the deputy of one of the brigades in the area quite soon. He was called the Red Star Brigade. And his name, as I said, it was still cherished and recognized in the area. And while he was fighting with the Red Star Brigade in October 1944, he was killed by German soldiers. So it was during the siege of Ponte dell'Olio, which is a town on the mountains, the Apennines, going up from Piacenza towards the Italian Riviera, the Ligurian Sea. And so he was trying to oppose the German troops advancing near the village of Albarola, which is close to Ponte dell'Olio, and he was shot. So his memory, I understand, still lives there in the province of Piacenza. Is still cherished, and so we are here today also to cherish him in his former city and country of Scotland and the United Kingdom. So his body is not here. Is in the monumental cemetery of Staglieno, which is the main cemetery in the city port of Genoa. I understand it's there because other members of the British Army, armed forces are buried there. And there is also a monument remembering him and other partisans near Piacenza, which was erected in 1969. And also there is this cross where we are here today, which remembers his life and his sacrifice. And it's also is cherished by his family. So as Italians in Edinburgh and anti-fascists of all nationalities, we would like to celebrate the liberation of Italy Day, of Festa Liberazione, honoring Capitano Mac as a symbol of all those who helped our country to be liberated, regardless of their nationality. And I would like again to urge you to use history and to draw lesson from the history of Italy and of the resistance to ensure that the same evils are not appearing again. Unfortunately, we know that there are a lot of right-wing and far-right governments in Europe, also in Italy, and they're not fascist, but they're bringing some of the same hatred or the same scapegoating of minorities. They try to divide people based on their religion or their skin tone or also their political beliefs. So I would like to urge you to be the partisans of this century, not fighting hopefully, but just to confront in your everyday life also, denouncing in your everyday life all these kind of evils, because we don't want to see the same sort of, pain and suffering to appear again on the soil of Europe. So I leave you with the rest of the ceremony with a motto. I think I can call it a motto, which is always said at the end of ceremonies in Italy. Of course, there are also the official authorities. I'm representing them somehow today. And the motto is Ora e sempre resistenza, which means resistance now and forever. Thank you.
Thanks. Just need to go and get my speech.
It's not long.
Thanks. My name's Donny as well, but it's Donny Gluckstein. I just wanted to say a little bit about why this is so important, because I think two words explain why it's important. Giorgia Meloni. If you look at the history of her party at the moment, Fratelli of Italy, you can trace it back to the MSI, you can trace it back to the fascist movement. There is a battle that goes on in Italy, then and now, about freedom and democracy, and it's absolutely right. You can never let go. You always need to keep fighting for it. And the Italian resistance is particularly important. There are a whole number of resistance movements right across the world during the Second World War. Most of them were in response to a foreign invasion, and it was a national resistance. I mean, they were very internationalist, but it was a national resistance against the foreign invasion. The Italian resistance was against its own government, and that takes a special courage and a special, strength to do. So that's the first thing I think that's important to say about it. The second thing, which was mentioned, is that the role of the working class. It was in Turin, it was in Milan, it was those mass strikes in Genoa, it was in that northern industrial area that the power of Mussolini was broken. It wasn't by the Allies bombing Italian civilians, which they did, in places like Turin and Milan. It was actually the Italian people taking on Mussolini in that way. And you can tell it by the fact that Mussolini was overthrown by the fascist council that he set up. They removed him, they sacked him, they put him in jail. And that was only because of the pressure from inside. It wasn't the Allies doing it, it wasn't somebody else, it was the Italian working class and the people that supported that. It was the resistance that made that possible. And we know what happened next, which is the Nazis had to fly in, drop parachutists, get him from the prison and transport him back to the north, where he set up the Salo Republic. In other words, set up under Nazi support fascism again. And so the resistance was fighting what they called nazi-fascismo. It was the two things together, because they were absolutely linked. And that was really, really impressive. And the power of the resistance, you can tell. Why did Hitler have to invade the north of Italy? He had to invade the north of Italy. It wasn't the Allies moving from the south. They were moving from the south, but they did, as you said, coming towards Naples, etc. They had to come into the north to control the Italian population. It was the Italian resistance and the people like Captain Mac doing it, helping them to liberate themselves. And that was what was so wonderful about the whole thing. And one thing that I think I need to say was the treachery of the Allies. Just to explain this. So, the Allies, the British and the Americans fundamentally, are moving from the south of Italy. They crossed over from Africa to Sicily, and they're working their way up. They wanted a free run. They just wanted to move in, take over Italy and establish their system and the way that they wanted things to be. They didn't like the resistance for that reason. The resistance was fighting back in the north, incredibly brave, liberating whole areas. In the mountains it's a bit easier, but they were liberating whole areas. They had their own currency, they had their own government, they were doing all those sorts of things. And then right at the crucial moment when the Italian resistance was in battle with Mussolini and the fascists, the General Alexander, the British general, made an announcement on the radio, and it wasn't encrypted or anything like that, so the Nazis could hear it. He said, "Oh, we are going to be stopping fighting." Which was absolute treachery, because you're basically saying to the Nazis, you've got a free run to attack the partisans. Fortunately, the partisans kept fighting, and they liberated the north. It was the partisans that liberated Genoa and places like that. It wasn't Allied armies. So the Italian resistance was an incredibly important movement, which we can all learn from, and we need to, because there is that battle clearly going on in Italy. It goes on in every country, as you said. It's going on in every country between freedom and democracy, between racism and internationalism, between human beings and the machine. So I'm very proud to be able to say these few words to you in honour of Captain Mac. Thanks very much.
Thank you. My name is Katrina Facenda, and I'm a city councillor here in Edinburgh. I'm a councillor for Leith, which is a part of Edinburgh which has a long history of Italian people coming to live there. And I am very, very proud to be here as an Italian Scot and someone who's actually spent a lot of my time living in Italy as well. I think that there are enormous lessons that all of us can learn from the partisans. And when I think, especially as a woman, of women who didn't even have the right to vote, who were willing to lay down their lives to fight for democracy and against the Nazis and the fascists, that is an incredible lesson for us all to learn. And I think it is a lesson with not only what's going on in Italy, but as Donnie said, what's going on around the world right now. There is a massive threat from the right, and it means that all of us have a responsibility not just to say that we stand up for democracy and not just to say that we are against fascism, but to actually actively organise and to fight and to stand up for people's rights as well. So I think that this is an excellent thing that is happening today, and hopefully through my role as being a city councillor, maybe we can make sure that next year we could actually maybe even formalise this to be an important part of what goes on in our city, because Edinburgh does have a record of standing up for people's rights, and it has a record as an internationalist city as well. So thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to be here today. I am Erika De Vivo, and I am Italian. My family comes from all over Italy, but part of my family comes from a small village called Castello Tesino, which is today in Trentino, but until a bit more than 100 years ago it used to be Austria, and it's a border village. My family on my mother's side had lived there forever, and my mom was actually born there, and I spent all my summers in that small village. I think it has maybe 100 people living there today. Most of them are quite old. But growing up in that village, I remember that there are two streets that are the only two streets in the whole village that are named after two women. And these two women are the girls that I would like to remember today. And they were called Clorinda and Ancilla. They were two partisans. They were 18 and 19 when they joined the partisan group of Gerlenda. And they were along with the boys of the village. They were, I think, around 20 young men working and fighting as partisans in the mountains up in the north. They fought alongside their friends, their brothers, and their cousins, and their boyfriends. And when they were captured, since they were women, of course, they suffered much more than their fellow men. And in particular, Clorinda, when she was captured, she was first tortured, then she was raped. And in the end, since she didn't say the names of her fellow partisans, she was killed with a shot in the head. The body was then dumped, and the local village people were not allowed to retrieve the body until a few days later. The same holds true for Ancilla. Ancilla was only 18, and she was killed because she didn't want to give the name away of her fellow friends. They were very young, and today they are the two youngest women to have received the Golden Medal of Military Honor in Memoriam. And their memory should be kept alive because they fought for what they thought it was right, and they suffered for that before their death. Clorinda's father was killed because her daughter and her son were both partisans. But Clorinda's brother, on the 25th of April, 1945, captured the 30 German soldiers, and he brought them to the same square where his father had been killed. And he made them walk along the wall of the main square, and then he let them go, telling them that he would have not done what they did to his sister. The memory of these two women should be kept alive, and today in the village it's still very difficult to talk about them because the village was almost destroyed. The German troops wanted to destroy the whole village. They surrounded it with tanks, with artillery, with machine guns, and they said that if the village people didn't give up the partisans, the whole village would have been destroyed. My family back then, my grandmother was only 8 years old, and she did remember that, and she did not want to talk about that. She was scared. People were forced to stay indoors, and all the men had to report to the Nazi Germans that were hosted in the main square of the small village. And after that, they went house to house looking for men between the age of 15 and 60, and looking for the weapons from First World War. And the story goes that everybody tried to hide these weapons in the hope they could use them if they needed. And in my house, I know that somewhere, I don't know where, there is a gun from the First World War that has been hidden in a wall. We kind of may know where it is, but we don't want to take it out. Also because in Italy you have to report if you have a weapon. But it's still there as a kind of memory to what has been and could have been, because our house was spared, many others weren't, and the village was almost destroyed, and unfortunately the two lives of these two girls have been destroyed. I left you with this small leaflet that I made with the photos of them, and I hope that you can carry their memory with you when you bring home this small leaflet. And my sister made a drawing to remember them and their fellow partisans as happy people who were actually fighting for what they believed. And it's not how they died that should be the only thing that should be remembered, but also how they lived and what they died for.
Io ho cantato solo io.
Bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 una mattina.
Stamattina mi sono alzato, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Stamattina mi sono alzato e ho trovato l'invaso. Oh partigiano, portami via. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Partigiano, portami via, che mi sento di morire. E se io muoio da partigiano, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. E se muoio da partigiano, tu mi devi seppellire e seppellire lassù in montagna. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Seppellire lassù in montagna, sotto l'ombra di un bel fior. Tutte le genti che passeranno, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. E le genti che passeranno ti diranno che bel fior. E questo è il fiore del partigiano. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Questo è il fiore del partigiano, morto per la libertà. Questo è il fiore del partigiano, morto per la libertà. Questo è il fiore del partigiano, morto per la libertà.